Good evening. You are listening to Silent Waves Radio, and we are breaking from our scheduled programming because we are receiving unconfirmed but credible reports out of the Persian Gulf region that require immediate attention. I am Alex Mercer, and I want to be deliberate and careful with what I say in these opening moments, because in situations like this, the first information is almost always incomplete, and sometimes it is wrong. What we know right now, and I want to stress, what we believe we know, is that within the last 45 minutes, there has been a significant military incident involving United States naval assets operating in or near the Strait of Hormuz. The nature of that incident is not yet confirmed. We have reached out to the Department of Defense, the State Department, and 3 separate regional correspondents. We are waiting. We are going to stay with you through this.
Alex, thank you. I'm Sierra Lane, and I want to join Alex in that note of caution because right now what we are hearing is fragmentary. But I also want to acknowledge something. If you are just tuning in because someone told you to turn on the radio, if your phone buzzed and you found us, you are not alone in feeling that tightening in your chest right now. That sensation is appropriate. Something has happened. The questions of exactly what, exactly where, exactly how many people are involved, those answers are coming. We will not leave this story. We will be here and we will tell you what we learn as we learn it.
All right. We are getting our first confirmed dispatch from our correspondent Marcus Webb, who is stationed in Bahrain. I'm going to read this exactly as it came in. At approximately 1945 local time, multiple explosions were reported near the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group operating in international waters, approximately 60 nautical miles southeast of the Strait of Hormuz. Initial reports from naval personnel describe incoming projectiles consistent with ballistic missile signatures. At least one vessel in the strike group has sustained damage. Casualty figures are not available. The source of the strike has not been officially attributed. Iranian state media has gone offline. That is the dispatch as received. I want to dwell on that last line. Iranian state media has gone offline. That is not a neutral detail.
No, it isn't. And Alex, I want to pick up on something in Marcus's dispatch. At least one vessel has sustained damage. Behind those words are sailors, young men and women. Some of them are 19, 20 years old. Some of them have been in the Navy for 15 years. All of them right now are in a situation that none of their training fully prepares them for because training is not the same as the real thing. We don't know how many people are on that vessel or those vessels. A carrier strike group typically involves several thousand personnel distributed across multiple ships. We don't know where those people are right now, whether they are fighting fires, whether they are in the water, whether they are trying to reach loved ones. I think about those families tonight, sitting at home, watching the same alerts that we are watching.
We are now receiving a second source confirmation from a Reuters wire dispatch. I'll read the relevant portion. U.S. military officials speaking on condition of anonymity have confirmed that the carrier strike group centered on the USS Theodore Roosevelt has come under attack from what appears to be a coordinated ballistic and cruise missile barrage in the northern Arabian Sea. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval and missile forces are the suspected origin. Early damage assessments suggest the USS Theodore Roosevelt itself may have sustained a direct hit to its flight deck. The Theodore Roosevelt is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. It is one of the largest warships ever built. It displaces approximately 100,000 tons. It carries a crew of approximately 5,000 sailors and airmen. If that ship has taken a direct hit to its flight deck, the implications, the operational implications, the human implications are very significant.
Alex, we are also getting our first listener messages coming in, and I want to read one because it is the kind of message that reminds you exactly who is listening to us right now. This comes in from a woman who identifies herself only as Patricia from San Diego. She writes, My son is stationed on a destroyer in the Fifth Fleet. I haven't been able to reach him. I don't know which ship. I don't know if he's okay. Please keep telling us what you know. Please don't stop talking. Patricia, we hear you. We are not stopping. And if your son is listening right now, anywhere, somehow, his mother is thinking about him. To everyone who is trying to reach someone in the Gulf tonight, keep trying. The communication systems are strained, but they are not gone. Keep trying.
We are now approximately 1 hour into this event, and I want to give you a clearer picture of the geopolitical and military architecture that frames what is happening. The United States Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Manama, Bahrain, has maintained a persistent presence in the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman for decades. Its mandate includes freedom of navigation operations, counter-piracy, and deterrence. The USS Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group that appears to have been targeted typically includes the carrier itself, 2 guided missile cruisers, and between 2 and 4 guided missile destroyers, as well as submarine escorts operating beneath the surface. This is not a small presence. This is a heavily armed, highly capable force. The fact that such a force has apparently been struck successfully, if these reports are accurate, represents an extraordinary military development. Iranian ballistic missiles, specifically those derived from the Shahab and Ahmad programs, have ranges capable of reaching targets throughout the Gulf. Cruise missiles of the type Iran has demonstrated can fly low and fast. A coordinated barrage combining both types would be designed to overwhelm point defense systems.
And I think what Alex is describing in technical terms is something I want to translate for a moment. What he's describing is a situation where someone planned this carefully. This was not a miscalculation. This was not an accident. Someone, somewhere, made a decision. They sat in a room, or several rooms, and they decided that today was the day. That decision is one of the most consequential human choices made in our lifetimes, and we don't fully understand it yet. We don't know what led to it. We don't know if there was a trigger event we haven't reported on. We don't know if there were ultimatums delivered in private that were rejected. All of those things matter enormously for understanding what comes next. Right now, though, the decision has been made and the consequences are already unfolding on the water, in the air, and in the lives of thousands of people.
I want to give you the latest on the regional picture. Qatar's government has just released a brief statement acknowledging that they have received notification from American military liaisons of an active military situation in the Gulf of Oman. Qatar hosts Al Udeid Air Base, which is the largest American military installation in the Middle East and the forward headquarters of United States Air Force's Central Command. We are receiving unconfirmed reports that Al Udeid has moved to its highest readiness posture. The UAE has closed its airspace over the Eastern Emirates as a precautionary measure. Bahrain's government has issued a statement urging calm and has put its National Guard on heightened alert. Saudi Arabia has not yet issued a formal statement, but our Riyadh correspondent tells us that there is significant movement of military vehicles in and around Riyadh this evening. Israel's government is in emergency session. Turkey's foreign minister has issued a call for de-escalation.
And outside the region, Alex, I want to bring in what's happening at a human level in places far from the Gulf. Oil markets have already gone into emergency suspension. That's not an abstraction. When oil markets go into emergency suspension, it means that within days, possibly within hours, the price of fuel begins to change. That affects every single person who drives a car, heats a home, or relies on goods transported across this country. That affects farmers. That affects truckers. That affects the families paying rent in places where heating oil is the only option in winter. The economic tremors of what is happening in the Arabian Sea are going to reach into kitchens and living rooms in Iowa and Montana and rural Georgia and every other place you can name. And that is only one dimension of what we are watching unfold.
I'm receiving a critical update from our Pentagon correspondent, James Aldridge. Reading now. The Department of Defense has issued a brief initial statement confirming that American naval vessels came under attack at approximately 1945 Gulf time. The statement reads in part, U.S. forces have come under unprovoked attack from Iranian military assets in the Gulf of Oman. The President has been notified. The National Security Council is convening. U.S. forces are responding in accordance with their rules of engagement. Further information will be provided as it becomes available. End of statement. So there it is. Official confirmation. Iran has attacked United States forces. This is not a gray zone incident. This is not a near miss or an accidental engagement. This is an official attribution from the United States government stating that Iranian military assets have struck American forces. We are now in territory that has no modern precedent. Iran has never directly and openly struck American forces in this manner. We are in new ground.
New ground. Alex said it simply, and I want to sit with that phrase for a moment. New ground. Everything that happens from this point forward is being written without a map. Our analysts and correspondents are doing their best. Our diplomats and officials are doing their best. But nobody has been here before. Not in this specific configuration. Not with this specific set of capabilities on both sides. Not with the world watching through social media and satellite and every form of instant communication that exists. And somewhere in all of this, there are families, Iranian families too, I want to say that, who are afraid tonight. Ordinary people in Tehran, in Shiraz, in Isfahan, who did not ask for this. Who woke up this morning and went to work, or took their children to school, or argued about what to have for dinner, and who are now, like all of us, trying to understand what their world has become.
We are approximately 2 hours into this event now. I want to give you updated casualty information, and I want to be transparent about the limitations of this information. The Pentagon has not released casualty figures. Naval Command has not released casualty figures. What we have comes from a combination of intercepts, regional hospital reports from Bahrain and Qatar, and fragmentary communications from personnel in the Gulf. Working from those imperfect sources, we believe that the initial strike may have resulted in between 30 and 100 casualties aboard the vessels struck. That range is enormous. It reflects genuine uncertainty. The lower figure would represent a terrible but operationally survivable incident. The upper figure would represent one of the deadliest single attacks on American forces since the Beirut bombing in 1983. I want to be honest with you that we do not know which end of that range is closer to the truth.
And behind those numbers, Alex always anchors us in the numbers, and that's right and good. That's his job, and he does it well. But behind those numbers are people. A sailor who grew up in Omaha and wanted to see the world. A petty officer who joined because the GI Bill was the only path to college. A lieutenant whose father was career Navy, who followed in footsteps laid down decades ago. We don't have their names yet. We may not have them for hours or days, but they are real. Their lives before this evening were real. We are going to honor that reality by telling the story honestly, without flinching from the difficulty of it, and without sensationalizing in ways that would dishonor them.
I want to bring in geopolitical context now. The escalation between the United States and Iran over the past 18 months has been severe. Following renewed sanctions targeting Iranian oil exports, the withdrawal from a series of diplomatic frameworks, and at least 3 incidents of disputed attribution in the Strait of Hormuz involving tanker seizures and drone shootdowns, relations between Washington and Tehran reached what analysts described as a pre-kinetic threshold. The Iranian government has made repeated public statements declaring that any continued interference with Iranian oil exports would be met with a comprehensive and devastating response. American officials dismissed those statements as rhetorical. Tonight suggests they were not rhetorical. There were also reports, never officially confirmed, of an American strike that killed a senior figure in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy approximately 6 weeks ago. If that strike occurred, tonight may be the direct response to it.
We are getting more listener messages, and I want to read one that I think captures something important. This one comes from a retired naval officer in Virginia Beach. He doesn't give his name, but he identifies himself as someone who served 22 years. He writes, "I know those ships. I know every inch of how they're designed, how the crew is trained, where the damage control teams are, how they fight fires. But I also know that no system is perfect. And if a carrier's flight deck takes a hit from a ballistic warhead, the people up there, the flight deck crew, the aircraft handlers, they're very exposed. I'm not going to pretend I'm not scared for them." A 22-year veteran of the Navy saying he's scared. I think that's worth hearing.
We are now getting reports, coming through multiple channels simultaneously, that the USS Theodore Roosevelt has sustained catastrophic damage. I want to be very careful with how I characterize this. The word catastrophic is coming from our correspondents, drawing on communications out of the Gulf. It does not necessarily mean sinking. A carrier can sustain catastrophic damage to one section, the flight deck, a hangar bay, a section of the island, and still remain afloat, still remain an operational platform in a diminished sense. What appears to have happened, based on the best information we have right now, is that the Theodore Roosevelt was struck by at least 2 ballistic warheads and possibly 1 or 2 additional cruise missile hits. There are fires burning aboard the ship. There are damage control operations underway. The ship is reportedly still making way, meaning it is still moving under its own power, which is significant. A ship that is making way has retained some operational capacity. That matters.
It matters, and I also want to note what it means that the ship is still moving. It means that somewhere in the bowels of that ship, in the engineering spaces deep below the waterline, there are sailors keeping those engines running while fire burns above them. There are people making decisions in real time, in smoke and heat and confusion, about how to save their ship and their shipmates. Those are acts of bravery that are happening right now as we sit here in the studio, and we will probably not know many of their names for weeks. Some of them we will never know. That is a kind of courage that I think deserves to be named, even when it cannot be personalized.
3 hours in now. The Pentagon has just released a second statement, and I will read it in full. The United States military confirms that the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group has been subjected to a coordinated ballistic and cruise missile attack by the Islamic Republic of Iran's military forces. The Theodore Roosevelt has sustained significant damage and has suffered casualties. 2 escort vessels, the USS Gridley and the USS Farragut, have also sustained damage. 1 vessel in the strike group, whose identity is being withheld pending next of kin notification, has sunk. The United States military is engaged in active defensive and retaliatory operations. The President will address the nation within the hour. Our thoughts are with the brave men and women of the United States Navy. 1 vessel has sunk. I need to let that settle. 1 vessel in the strike group has sunk.
1 vessel has sunk. A guided missile destroyer, we believe, based on the vessels named in that statement. The Gridley and the Farragut are both named as damaged, which suggests that a 3rd vessel, unnamed, is the one that has gone down. A destroyer carries a crew of approximately 300 people. 300. When a ship sinks in combat, some of those people evacuate successfully. Some of them do not. The water in the Gulf of Oman tonight is warm, which is the one mercy in all of this. Warm water gives people longer to stay alive before rescue. But in the dark, in the middle of a combat operation, with fires burning on other ships, with missiles potentially still in the air, rescue operations are extraordinarily difficult.
We are now receiving reports from the region that the United States has launched retaliatory strikes against targets inside Iran. The reports are fragmentary, but consistent across multiple sources. Targets appear to include Iranian missile launch sites in Khuzestan province and Fars province, both of which are significant missile operating provinces in western and central Iran. There are also reports of strikes against Iranian naval assets in Bandar Abbas, which is Iran's most significant naval facility on the Strait of Hormuz. We are not in a position to confirm battle damage assessment. We don't know how effective these strikes have been. What we know is that the United States military was not going to absorb this attack without responding, and the response appears to have begun within approximately 2 hours of the initial Iranian strike. This is moving with extraordinary speed.
And speed matters because speed is what prevents space for diplomacy. When things move this fast, strikes, counter-strikes within hours, the windows for phone calls, for back-channel messages, for the kind of quiet conversations that have historically stopped conflicts from escalating further, those windows get smaller with every passing minute. I've been in contact with a diplomat who spoke to me on background. I won't characterize their nationality or role. And their words were stark. They said, "We have been trying to reach Tehran for 90 minutes. Nobody is answering." Nobody is answering. That is either because the communication infrastructure has been disrupted by the American strikes, which would be operationally understandable, or because someone in Tehran has made a decision not to answer. The difference between those two explanations is the difference between a very bad situation and a situation that becomes something else entirely.
5 hours into this event, I want to give you the picture as we understand it regionally and globally. Within Iran, major cities, including Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz, are under blackout conditions in terms of international communications. Iranian state television has broadcast a brief statement from a government spokesperson declaring that Iran has exercised its right to respond to American terrorist aggression, and warning that any further American military action will result in responses of escalating severity. That statement is important. It is not a statement of war termination. It is a statement of continued threat. Outside Iran, Saudi Arabia has now formally closed its airspace. The United Arab Emirates has evacuated its northern coastal areas, citing the possibility of further missile activity. Kuwait has declared a state of emergency. Iraq, which hosts a significant number of American troops, has convened an emergency session of parliament. The American bases in Iraq, at Al-Assad, at Erbil, have gone to maximum force protection posture.
In Iraq, which I want to stay on for a moment, the situation there is deeply complicated and deeply human. Iraq is a country that has seen decades of war, invasion, occupation, civil conflict, and the kind of trauma that becomes embedded in a national identity. The people of Baghdad tonight are not strangers to the sound of air raid sirens. They are not strangers to the particular anxiety of not knowing where the next explosion will come from. And many of them are caught between governments and loyalties they did not choose. Iraqi Shia militias aligned with Iran, American forces they were told were there to help, a central government trying to thread an impossible needle. When we talk about Iraq as a strategic location, I want us to also remember that it is a place where 8 million people live in Baghdad alone, and those 8 million people are watching this unfold from inside it.
I want to update the casualty picture with the same caution I've applied throughout. This is our best estimate at hour 5. On the American side, the sunken destroyer is believed to have had a crew of approximately 287. Rescue operations are ongoing and have recovered an uncertain number of survivors. The Theodore Roosevelt has reported a significant number of casualties, with estimates ranging from 60 to 120 dead and a similar number wounded. The 2 damaged destroyers have casualties in the tens. Total American casualties at this stage We are estimating somewhere between 150 and 300 killed, with a similar number wounded. These are estimates. They may be revised downward if rescue operations succeed, and if our initial damage assessments were too severe. They may also be revised upward. On the Iranian side, the American strikes on Khuzestan and Bandar Abbas have resulted in an unknown number of casualties among Iranian military personnel. Civilian proximity to military targets in Iran is a significant concern.
I want to read another listener message. This one is from someone in Dearborn, Michigan. Dearborn has one of the largest Iranian American communities in the United States, and I want to read this carefully. The writer says, "My parents came here from Iran 40 years ago. I am American. I have cousins still in Tehran. I have friends in the Navy. Tonight, I don't know how to be both things at once, and I'm asking you to please remember that there are people like me listening, and we are carrying something very heavy right now. I want to honor that message fully. This conflict, like every conflict, does not sort neatly into sides. There are human beings on every coordinate of this situation, and the Iranian American community tonight is in particular pain. People who love both countries, who have family on both sides of what is happening, who did not ask for any of this. We see you, we hear you."
The President has now spoken from the Oval Office. The address was brief, approximately 8 minutes, and I want to give you the core substance. The President confirmed the Iranian attack. He called it an act of war. He stated that the United States would respond with all necessary force to defend American personnel and interests in the region. He announced the invocation of war powers and indicated that he would consult with congressional leadership within 24 hours. He did not describe specific military operations currently underway. He called on Iran's leadership to immediately stand down and enter into diplomatic communication. He invoked the memories of the sailors lost tonight. And he said, I am reading this directly from the transcript, "America has never started a war, but America has always finished one." The response in the region to that statement has been immediate and in many places alarmed.
America has always finished one. That phrase will be analyzed and reacted to all over the world for the next many hours. In Tehran, if anyone there is able to hear it, those words will be heard one way. In Beijing, they will be heard another way. In Moscow, another. In Tel Aviv, another. In Riyadh, in London, in every capital where people are watching tonight. Words from the most powerful office in the world, at a moment of open military conflict, carry weight that extends far beyond their literal meaning. And right now, that weight is falling on a world that is already in motion. Navies are moving. Airfields are being loaded. Diplomatic channels are either burning up with traffic or going silent. This is the most dangerous night on Earth in a very long time, and we are in the middle of it.
7 hours in. I want to give you a comprehensive update on the infrastructure and logistics picture. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of the world's oil supply transits, has been effectively closed. No commercial vessel is currently moving through the strait. This is the first time in history that the strait has been closed by an act of war rather than threat. Insurance underwriters have suspended all policies for Gulf region shipping. Lloyd's of London has declared a war risk zone encompassing the entire Arabian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and the Red Sea approaches. The implications: global oil supply disruption on a scale that has not been seen since the 1973 embargo. Unlike 1973, however, this is not a political embargo. This is a consequence of active combat operations, which means it cannot be ended by a political decision alone. It will end only when ships can safely navigate. And right now, nobody knows when that will be.
And that closure, 20% of the world's oil supply, is not an abstraction that only affects traders on exchanges. Within 72 hours, if this continues, you will see the first visible effects at fuel stations in the United States, in Europe, in Asia. Within a week, supply chains begin to strain. Within 2 weeks, industries that depend on just-in-time logistics, which is most industries in the developed world, begin to make emergency decisions. Hospitals have backup generators, but they run on fuel. Food distribution networks run on fuel. Emergency services run on fuel. The cascade of consequences from this single fact, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, is something that economists and planners have war-gamed for decades and always hoped would never actually happen. Tonight, it is happening.
9 hours in. We have significant new developments. Iran has launched a second wave of strikes. This wave appears to be targeting American bases in the region. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar has sustained missile impacts. At least 2 confirmed, possibly more. Initial reports suggest runway damage and casualties at the base. Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq has also been struck, with multiple missile impacts reported. Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan has been struck as well. I want to be very precise about the significance of this. Iran has now struck American military installations in 3 countries, international waters, Qatar, and Iraq, within a 9-hour window. This is no longer a single incident. This is a campaign. Someone in Iran has made the decision to escalate rather than pause, and that decision changes the strategic picture in ways that are very difficult to fully calculate in real time.
At Al Udeid tonight, there are approximately 10,000 American service members. 10,000. Plus a significant number of allied forces, British, French, Australian, and others. The runway damage means that operations are degraded. It also means that evacuation options for non-essential personnel are constrained. And it means that the families of those 10,000 people in the United States, in the UK, in Australia, France, those families are now watching this broadcast, or its equivalents, and they are experiencing something that no family should have to experience, but that military families carry as a permanent possibility. The message I want to send to those families is the same one I've been sending all evening. We are not leaving this story. We are telling it honestly. Your people are not forgotten.
12 hours in. The casualty picture continues to evolve. On the American side, we are now receiving official confirmation of casualties for the first time. The Department of Defense has confirmed 112 killed in action across all incidents. The initial carrier strike group attack, the sinking of the destroyer, the strikes on Al Udeid and Al-Assad. 112 confirmed. The wounded figure is 237. Those are the official figures as of this moment. Among the 112 killed, all branches of service are represented. The figures for Al Udeid and Al-Assad are still being compiled because those bases are still under active threat conditions, and full accounting is not yet possible. On the Iranian side, United States military officials have stated that American strikes have struck at least 4 Iranian missile launch facilities and 2 naval bases. Iranian casualty figures are not available. Iranian government and military communications remain largely severed from the outside world.
I want to pause on 112 confirmed killed because I think numbers of that size can begin to blur, and I want to push back against that blurring. 112 people woke up yesterday. 112 people had a last conversation, a last meal, a last thought before they went to their duty station. 112 families will receive the visit, the knock on the door, the person standing there in uniform, and the words that no family ever prepares for fully. And 237 wounded. Those are the people who are alive but who are changed, whose bodies have been altered by this night, who will carry it physically for the rest of their lives. I don't want the numbers to become just numbers. Each one is a life and a family, and a future that has been either cut off or permanently altered.
14 hours into this event. The White House has announced that the President has invoked the War Powers Resolution and has formalized a state of armed conflict between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is the first formal declaration of a state of armed conflict involving the United States and Iran in the history of the two nations. Congress will convene an emergency session in approximately 3 hours. NATO has convened an emergency consultation under Article 4. Saudi Arabia has announced the closure of its borders with Iraq. Turkey has announced it is prepared to act as a mediator and has been in contact with both Tehran and Washington. China has issued a statement calling for immediate cessation of military activities and dialogue. Russia has issued a statement condemning American aggression, while separately, according to our diplomatic sources, sending a private message to Tehran urging restraint.
Russia's public statement condemning American aggression while privately urging Tehran to exercise restraint. That is a diplomatic data point that matters enormously. It tells us that even parties who are politically aligned with Iran understand that what is happening here carries risks that exceed any political calculation. When Russia is privately urging restraint, it is because the people in Moscow are running the same scenarios that the people in Washington are running, and those scenarios have outcomes that nobody wants. The fact that those quiet messages are apparently being sent is, in the grim arithmetic of this situation, something approaching good news. Not good news. Not anything close to good news tonight. But a signal that the people with the most capacity to make this far worse are at least partially aware of the stakes.
16 hours in. I need to give you an update on the broader regional humanitarian situation, because the military story and the human story are now becoming inseparable. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the ongoing combat operations have triggered significant displacement. In Kuwait, approximately 300,000 civilians living in the northern coastal areas near the Iraqi border are in the process of evacuating inland. The roads are jammed. The government evacuation plan has not been adequately tested at this scale, and there are reports of gridlock on Highway 80, a road that has its own grim history, and on the coastal expressways. In Qatar, the population centers of Doha and Al Wakra are under general advisory to shelter in place. Doha's Hamad International Airport has been closed to commercial traffic following the Al Udeid strikes, stranding an estimated 40,000 passengers in or near the terminal.
40,000 passengers stranded in an airport. I want to think about that for a moment. Those are people from every country, every background, who are in transit, on their way to family, on their way home from business, on their way to see a new part of the world, and who are now sitting in an airport, watching the same news we are watching, with no flight and no clear path forward. Some of them have children with them. Some of them have medical needs. Some of them don't speak the local language and don't know where to go or who to ask. Airport terminals are not designed to be long-term shelters, and the systems that sustain them, food, water, power, will come under pressure within 24 to 48 hours. The Qatari government is doing their best under extraordinary circumstances, but the scale of this is testing every system simultaneously.
18 hours in, I want to give you the military operational update as we understand it. American forces have now conducted over 200 strike sorties against targets inside Iran. The targets have included missile launch sites, command and control facilities, naval assets, and this is significant, the Fordow and Natanz nuclear facilities. I want to be very precise about what that means. The United States has struck Iranian nuclear sites. This was anticipated by analysts as a near inevitable component of any comprehensive American response. But its execution represents an extraordinary escalation in itself. Iran's nuclear program, whatever its status, is a matter of intense national prestige to the Iranian government and Iranian public. Striking those sites is not merely a military act. It is a statement about Iran's future, and it will be received with fury by Tehran and by much of the Iranian population, regardless of their views on their own government.
The Natanz facility, the Fordow facility. I want to put those names in human context. Both of those sites are located in populated areas of Iran. Fordow is built into a mountain near the city of Qom, one of the holiest cities in Shia Islam, a city of enormous religious and cultural significance. Natanz is a city of 160,000 people. When we talk about strikes on nuclear facilities, we are talking about physical destruction in places where people live. The radioactive implications of striking nuclear facilities are complex. Enrichment facilities are different from reactors in terms of immediate radiological risk. But the destruction of infrastructure, the disruption of an area, the psychological impact on populations who have lived under the shadow of these facilities and who now see them become targets, all of that is part of the reality of what tonight means for the people of Iran.
21 hours in, we have reached a development that I have to characterize very carefully. Iran has launched ballistic missiles toward Israel. Multiple missiles from launch sites in western Iran. The Iron Dome and Arrow defense systems are active. We are receiving reports of intercepts, but also of at least partial penetrations of the defense envelope. The city of Haifa has sustained missile impacts. Tel Aviv's outskirts have been struck. The Israeli Air Force is responding. I want to be very careful here. Israel entering this conflict, whether because of Iranian strikes or by choice, expands the geographic and political scope of this confrontation in ways that are very difficult to contain. Israel has capabilities, including capabilities that are rarely named directly, that could fundamentally alter the nature of what we are discussing tonight.
The expansion to Israel. I've been waiting for this with a kind of dread. The Israeli-Iranian relationship has been a cold conflict for decades, one marked by proxy fights and covert operations and mutual existential rhetoric. The people of Tel Aviv, of Haifa, of cities across Israel have been through wars and rocket campaigns before. They know the sound of sirens. They know how to run to shelters. That knowledge is a form of resilience, but it is also a form of trauma. And tonight those sirens are sounding again for reasons that have nothing to do with any choice they made. And in the West Bank, in Gaza, whatever the status of those territories are, there are people who are also under that same sky, hearing those same sounds, with far less shelter and far less certainty than the people in Israeli cities. Every expansion of this conflict means more people caught inside it who had no voice in how it began.
24 hours. One full day since the first strike. I want to give you a comprehensive accounting of where we stand. American killed in action, now officially confirmed at 189, with an additional 412 wounded. The USS destroyer that sank, we can now name it, the Navy has made the next of kin notifications, was the USS Callahan. Of its crew of 281, 67 have been rescued. That means a potential loss of up to 214 people on that single vessel. Though search and rescue operations are continuing, and that number may improve. The Theodore Roosevelt remains afloat and is currently being escorted toward Djibouti under heavy air cover. Fires aboard are under control. Israeli casualties from the Iranian missile strikes. 23 confirmed dead, over 200 wounded. Iranian casualties. The Iranian government has not released figures. Our estimates, based on available information, suggest Iranian military casualties of between 300 and 500, with civilian casualties in areas near military targets that could be significantly higher.
I want to stay with that number for the USS Callahan. Up to 214 people. 214 names that haven't been spoken publicly yet. 214 futures. 214 sets of parents, siblings, spouses, children who are waiting. Some of them already know. from the notification visit, and are in a grief that is beyond anything I can accurately describe with words. Others are still in that terrible middle state of not knowing, of staring at a phone, of being told we'll let you know as soon as we have information, and understanding that those words, as kind as they are, contain within them the possibility of the worst thing. There is no adequate way to speak to that. There is only acknowledgement. We see you. We know what you are waiting for. We are so sorry for what this night has asked you to carry.
32 hours in, the conflict has expanded significantly. Israeli airstrikes have struck targets in Syria and Lebanon, Hezbollah infrastructure, Iranian logistics routes, command centers. Hezbollah has responded with rocket fire into northern Israel. The Lebanese government has declared a state of emergency. Syria's government, to the surprise of many analysts, has issued a statement calling for de-escalation and has indicated it will not permit its territory to be used as an active corridor for further Iranian strikes. This is a significant defection from Iran's expected coalition behavior. In Iraq, the political situation has become extraordinarily complex. Iraqi Shia militia groups have conducted drone and rocket attacks against American bases, with 3 additional Americans killed. At the same time, the Iraqi government has publicly demanded that all American forces depart Iraq within 72 hours, a demand that the United States has rejected. Iraq is effectively becoming a secondary front.
I want to address something that's been in my mind for many hours. We have been talking about this largely through the frame of military operations, of state actors, of capitals and governments and generals. But I want to spend a moment on the sea, on the water, the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, the Persian Gulf. These are bodies of water that have carried human beings, their trade, their goods, their migrations for 10,000 years. Right now, tonight, those waters are a combat zone. There are American sailors in the water. There are debris fields from sunken ships. There are rescue helicopters with searchlights sweeping the dark surface. There are, likely, Iranian naval personnel who were aboard ships that were struck by American retaliatory strikes, and who are also in the water, or who are dead at their posts. The sea does not care about flags or alliances. The sea simply receives what falls into it. And what is falling into it tonight is a generation of young people who did not ask for this.
40 hours in. I want to give you the global economic picture because it has reached a threshold of crisis. Oil prices have reached $312 a barrel on the futures markets, a figure that analysts call effectively uncharted territory. The major economic powers are responding. The United States has announced a release from its strategic petroleum reserve. China has announced it is in contact with alternative supply partners, Russia primarily. But the logistics of rapidly rerouting global oil supply are immense. Europe, which is already energy stressed from previous supply disruptions, is facing potential heating and power shortfalls if this situation continues into next winter. Several Asian economies that are almost entirely dependent on Gulf oil imports, Japan, South Korea, India, have declared energy emergencies. Japan's government has announced power rationing in non-essential sectors beginning within 72 hours. South Korea has begun curtailing industrial power usage. India's government is in emergency session.
The ripple out from this point continues almost infinitely. When South Korea curtails industrial power usage, that affects the production of semiconductors, of electronics, of steel. When Japan begins rationing power, that affects not just Japanese quality of life, but the supply chains of every industry globally that depends on Japanese components and manufacturing. We are in a world of profound interdependence, and this conflict is not a localized event. It is a stone dropped in a pond, and the rings are already reaching shores that seem impossibly far from the Arabian Sea. A family in Seoul who has nothing to do with any of this, who never thought about the Strait of Hormuz, who is suddenly being told their power will be limited, They are as much a part of this story as the sailors and the soldiers and the governments. Because this is what war in the 21st century actually looks like when it happens between significant actors in a critical strategic location.
48 hours. 2 full days. I want to give you a hard-edged assessment of where things stand militarily. Iran's missile force has been significantly degraded by American strikes. The Shahab-3, Emad, and Khorramshahr missile systems, the primary long-range strike assets, have had their known launch sites destroyed. However, Iranian mobile launch platforms, which are designed precisely to survive this kind of strike campaign, remain active. Iran has demonstrated the capacity to continue launching, though at a reduced rate. The IRGC naval forces in the Gulf have been effectively eliminated as an organized force. Several surface vessels have been sunk, and the fast attack boat doctrine that Iran has long relied on as an asymmetric tool against American surface ships has been effectively countered. However, Iranian submarine activity in the Gulf and Gulf of Oman remains a concern. At least 2 Iranian midget submarines are believed to be currently at large. Iranian-backed proxy forces throughout the region, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Lebanon, continue to operate and represent a persistent, distributed threat that cannot be addressed through strikes on Iran proper.
The proxy forces in Yemen, I want to stay there. Houthi forces in Yemen have now launched a significant drone and missile barrage targeting Saudi oil infrastructure. The Abqaiq facility, the world's largest oil processing complex, which handles about 7% of global oil supply by itself, has reportedly been struck. The damage is unknown but potentially severe. If Abqaiq is significantly damaged, add several percentage points to the global oil supply disruption we already discussed. The Saudi government has not yet made a statement about the strike's severity, but I also want to talk about what is happening to Yemeni civilians in this moment, because Yemen has been in a state of humanitarian catastrophe for nearly a decade. A country of 40 million people already suffering from famine, disease, infrastructure collapse, and years of active warfare is now being pulled deeper into a regional conflict it has no power to escape. The children in Sana'a, in Hodeidah, in Aden, they are not combatants. They are the smallest people in the largest story, and they are being crushed by it.
56 hours in. The diplomatic picture is shifting, and I want to give you careful analysis here. Qatar has successfully established a back-channel communication line between Washington and Tehran. The specifics are unknown to us, but our diplomatic sources tell us that communication is occurring. Direct communication, not through intermediaries alone. This is significant. The fact that both governments are talking, even at a back-channel level, suggests that both sides recognize the need for off-ramps. American conditions, as reported by our correspondent, include a full ceasefire, withdrawal of all Iranian-directed proxy forces from active engagement against American and Allied positions, acknowledgement of responsibility for the initial attack, and acceptance of an international inquiry. Iranian conditions, as reported, cessation of all American strikes on Iranian territory, lifting of sanctions, withdrawal of American forces from the Gulf region, and guarantees of Iranian sovereignty. Those positions are very far apart, but they are positions being communicated rather than simply missiles and bombs being exchanged, and that is not nothing.
It is not nothing. And I want to tell you why diplomacy matters even when the positions seem impossibly far apart. When people are talking, they are not only fighting. The act of talking, even when the words are adversarial, creates a kind of structure that fighting alone does not have. It creates the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility, that someone in one of those rooms, on one of those calls, will say something that the other person responds to differently than expected. That a fatigue sets in, a recognition of how bad this has already gotten and how much worse it could get. That the weight of the numbers we've been reporting all night falls on someone who has the power to say, enough. We don't know if that moment is coming, but the fact that the phone is ringing and being answered means it hasn't been ruled out.
64 hours in, 3 days approaching. The casualty figures as of this hour: American killed in action, 291. American wounded, over 600. The Theodore Roosevelt has reached Djibouti and is undergoing emergency repairs. She will not be operational for at minimum 6 to 12 months. Israeli casualties from Iranian and Hezbollah attacks: 67 dead, over 500 wounded. Saudi casualties from Houthi strikes: 32 dead, primarily in the eastern oil field regions. Iraqi civilian casualties from the combination of American strikes on militia positions, militia rocket attacks, and general chaos. Estimated in the hundreds, precise figures unknown. Iranian casualties, and I want to acknowledge the difficulty of this number. We are now estimating, based on available information, including regional reports and satellite imagery, that Iranian military casualties may be between 1 and 3,000. Iranian civilian casualties near military target areas, unknown but likely in the hundreds to thousands.
I want to speak to those Iranian civilian casualties directly and with full weight. These are people who live in a country with a government they may or may not support, whose military made a decision that brought warfare to their doorsteps. They did not make that decision. A farmer in Khuzestan province near the missile sites. A family in the suburb of a city near a naval base. People who had nothing to do with the calculations of the IRGC or the Supreme National Security Council or any governmental body. When bombs fall, they do not ask for voter registration cards. They do not distinguish between those who supported this government's decision and those who spent their lives hoping things would be different. That is one of the most unbearable truths of warfare, and it is happening right now to real people in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I want to say their names, even though I don't know their names, and acknowledge their humanity.
72 hours, full 3 days. The ceasefire negotiations through the Qatari back channel have produced a preliminary framework. Both sides have agreed to a 24-hour operational pause, not a ceasefire, but a pause, during which no new strikes will be initiated. This pause is conditioned on the other side's compliance, which means it is fragile, but it is holding as of this moment. The pause has immediately allowed for several things to happen. Search and rescue operations for the USS Callahan's remaining missing personnel have resumed with greater intensity. Humanitarian corridors in Iraq have been opened for the movement of civilians and emergency supplies. Qatar and Oman are facilitating the movement of medical personnel into Iran for the first time since communications were severed. The UN Secretary General has issued a statement welcoming the pause and calling for it to be extended and formalized.
During this pause, something important is happening that doesn't make headlines, but that matters enormously. People are finding out. In the sense of the families who have been waiting are getting information. Some of that information is the relief of hearing a voice on the phone. Some of it is the worst confirmation. Sailors from the Callahan who survived and were rescued are being allowed to make calls. I imagine those calls. The voice on the other end that you have been imagining for 3 days, that you have been willing into existence, that you have been bargaining with the universe to hear, and then it is there. That call is happening right now somewhere, multiple times. And the other call, the one where a uniformed officer knocks on a door and a spouse answers and sees the expression on that officer's face, that is also happening. Both of those things are happening simultaneously, and both of them are part of the full reality of what this week has been.
I want to give you a 1-week summary as we approach the 7-day mark. The operational pause has held, with minor violations on both sides. Iranian proxies in Iraq fired rockets at an American base, killing 2 additional soldiers American aircraft struck a vessel that was believed to be resupply for IRGC naval remnants, killing an unknown number. Neither side has officially broken the pause. Negotiations are continuing with increasing international participation. The UN Security Council has passed a resolution, with China and Russia abstaining rather than vetoing, which is itself significant, calling for a formal ceasefire and international mediation. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to commercial shipping, though an American naval escort system for humanitarian and medical supply vessels has been established. Global oil prices are at $330 a barrel. Several European nations have declared energy emergencies. India and South Korea are operating under rationing.
In the second week, I want to tell you what the world looks like in the smaller spaces. In Bahrain, where the Fifth Fleet is headquartered, the streets are very quiet. The restaurants and shops near the base that cater to American sailors are mostly closed. The families of sailors who live in base housing are going through the specific kind of suspension that military families know. The way time goes both too fast and too slowly. The way a normal routine becomes almost grotesque to maintain. The way you find yourself making coffee and folding laundry while somewhere across the water, someone who matters to you more than your own life is in a situation you can't control and can barely imagine. Bahrain itself is a small country of extraordinary complexity. A majority Shia population governed by a Sunni monarchy, historically a place of tension. And the American military presence there is viewed differently by different communities. Tonight, those communities are processing this week's events through very different lenses.
Approaching 2 weeks, the formal ceasefire was signed on day 11, brokered by Qatar with co-signatories, including Oman, Turkey, and the United Nations. It is held. I want to give you the final accounting of this conflict as it stands. American killed in action, total 347. That includes the initial carrier strike group attack, the sinking of the USS Callahan, the strikes on Al-Udeid and Al-Assad, the subsequent proxy attacks in Iraq and Syria, and individual incidents during the operational period. American wounded, 712. The USS Callahan, 239 of her 281 crew members are confirmed dead or missing and presumed dead. The Theodore Roosevelt will require extensive repair and will return to service eventually. Israeli dead, 94. Israeli wounded, over 900. Saudi dead, 71. Saudi wounded, 233.
And on the Iranian side, Iranian military dead. The government of Iran has released a figure of 1,217. Independent analysts working from satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and regional reports believe the true figure may be between 1,800 and 2,500. Iranian civilian dead. The Iranian Red Crescent has estimated that civilian casualties in areas proximate to military targets number approximately 800 to 1,200. This is a contested figure that will be studied for years. In total, across all parties and all nations involved, the best estimate of human lives lost in this 14-day conflict is somewhere between 3,000 and 4,500. That is a range that history will eventually narrow, but even the lower bound is devastating, and even the upper bound is, in the grim mathematics of major power conflict, smaller than it might have been, smaller than the worst scenarios that were on the table. That is cold comfort, but it is the only comfort that is honestly available.
I want to speak now about what was lost beyond the human lives. The USS Callahan, a United States Navy destroyer, a vessel that had served for 16 years, that had been in 6 deployments, rests at the bottom of the Arabian Sea. Its final position has been recorded. It will be designated a naval gravesite. The Theodore Roosevelt, the carrier that anchored the strike group that was the primary target of the Iranian attack, is in Djibouti harbor with a destroyed flight deck and the scars of fire across its superstructure. She will sail again, but changed. Iran's missile force infrastructure has been set back by an estimated 5 to 8 years. Iran's naval presence in the Gulf has been effectively eliminated and will take years to rebuild. The Fordow and Natanz facilities, the nuclear sites, have been destroyed. This fundamentally alters Iran's nuclear calculus and will be a source of profound Iranian grievance for generations.
The nuclear question. I want to address it carefully because it is something that will shape the next decade and more. The destruction of Fordow and Natanz does not mean Iran cannot rebuild a nuclear program. It means it has been set back. The knowledge, the engineering expertise, the enriched material that was already processed, none of that was destroyed. What was destroyed was infrastructure, and when people or nations feel that something precious to them has been taken by force, they do not typically give up on that thing. They become more determined. The international community's ability to negotiate a long-term settlement on the Iranian nuclear question, which was already extraordinarily difficult, has been made harder, not easier, by these strikes. The diplomats who now have to walk into negotiations with Tehran know that they are walking into a room where the other side has genuine grievances of a magnitude that will not be easily addressed.
The Strait of Hormuz. A limited commercial reopening has been negotiated as part of the ceasefire framework. Vessels bearing specific insurance and flag arrangements are now moving through. The volume is approximately 30% of pre-conflict levels. Full normalization of strait traffic is expected to take 2 to 3 months. Global oil prices remain above $200 a barrel. The economic damage to the global economy from the 14-day conflict and the subsequent partial closure is being estimated at between $4 and $7 trillion. That number is difficult to fully comprehend. It represents lost economic activity, supply chain damage, increased energy costs absorbed by businesses and families, and the direct costs of the military operations themselves. Some of that damage is permanent. Contracts canceled, facilities destroyed, investment decisions made on the basis of a perceived risk that will not quickly diminish. Recovery will be slow and uneven, with the developing world bearing disproportionate costs.
I want to take a moment, as we approach the end of our coverage of the immediate crisis phase, to think about the young people who will grow up in the wake of this. Children who are infants or toddlers will grow up in a world shaped by what happened in the Gulf in these 14 days. They will study this event in school. They will inherit the economic consequences, the geopolitical realignment, the generational trauma on multiple sides. Young Iranians who will grow up with the story of the night their country's military sites were destroyed, and who will decide, each in their own way, what that story means for who they are and what they want. Young Americans who will grow up knowing that 347 of their countrymen died in a conflict that most of the country is only now fully understanding. Young Israelis and Saudis and Kuwaitis and Iraqis. All of them inheriting this. None of them having had any say in it.
As we close this extended broadcast, we have been on the air now for over 30 hours of continuous coverage, and I want to close with clarity and precision. What ultimately caused this conflict? The Iranian decision to launch a coordinated ballistic and cruise missile strike against the USS Theodore Roosevelt carrier strike group in the Gulf of Oman on this date. That decision was the proximate cause. The deeper causes include decades of sanctions, covert conflict, diplomatic failure, the killing of IRGC personnel in an unacknowledged American strike, Iran's assessment that American deterrence had weakened, and the accumulated pressure of an oil export crisis that Iran's government determined had become existential. All of those factors are real. None of them justify the deaths of 347 Americans, or of the Iranian soldiers and civilians who also died in the response, or of the 94 Israelis, or the Saudis, or the unnamed others.
What remains of the world afterward? I want to answer that with something other than geopolitics, though the geopolitical answer is important. A fundamentally altered Middle Eastern security architecture, a United States whose military presence in the Gulf will be restructured, an Iran that is isolated but not broken, a global economy that has absorbed a severe shock and is recovering but will bear the scar, a nuclear question that is unresolved and now more fraught. But when I ask what remains of the world, I mean something more than that. What remains is the ordinary people in every country touched by this conflict, who got through it, who survived it, who are going to wake up tomorrow and try to make something of what they have left. The sailor who was rescued from the water near the Callahan and who spent 3 days in a hospital in Bahrain before being told she could go home. The Iranian family in Khuzestan who sheltered in their basement for 2 weeks and emerged to find their neighborhood damaged, but their lives intact. The Kuwaiti family who evacuated and stayed with relatives in the interior and who is now making the drive back to their home on the coast, not knowing quite what they'll find.
The human cost in full: 3,412 people killed in the 14 days of active conflict. That figure, compiled across all nations, all services, all categories of military and civilian dead, is the number that history will record as the cost of this war. 3,412. The conflict lasted 14 days, from the first missile to the ceasefire signature. No nation was entirely destroyed or lost. No country ceased to exist. Iran remains a nation of 90 million people with a government that is damaged, humiliated in military terms, and more isolated than before, but which retains its territory and its people. The United States has lost 347 service members and a carrier and a destroyer, and has been reminded at terrible cost that power and deterrence are not the same thing as invulnerability. Israel has absorbed attacks and responded with attacks and has no new peace and no new war. Only the continuation of an old dread.
The ending I want to give you as we come to the conclusion of this broadcast is not the one of cautious hope that I might have wished for, because I want to be honest with you. The ceasefire is real. The fighting has stopped. The phones are being answered in Doha, the ships are beginning to move, the families of the Callahans dead are beginning the terrible work of grief and memory and moving forward. All of that is real. But underneath all of it is the unaddressed architecture of everything that led to this moment. The grievances, the miscalculations, the assumption on multiple sides that the other side would not actually do it. Those things are not resolved. They are suspended. The ceasefire has stopped the bleeding, but the wound is still there, and what happens to it over the next years and decades is a question that no one in any room tonight can answer with confidence.
What I can tell you with confidence is this: the world on the other side of this 14-day event is not the same world that existed before the first missile was fired. Not for the families of those 347 Americans. Not for the communities across Iran that buried their dead in the first days of this month. Not for the global economy, which will take years to fully absorb what happened to it when the strait closed. Not for the diplomatic and security architecture of the Middle East, which has been cracked open and will be rebuilt over years into something new whose shape we cannot yet see. We are at the beginning of consequences, not the end of them. And the work of understanding those consequences, accurately, honestly, without flinching, without sensationalizing, is the work that we in journalism are obligated to continue.
We have been on the air for a very long time. In that time, we have tried to tell you not only what happened, but who it happened to. Because in the end, events are made of people, and the meaning of events lives in people. In the grief and the courage and the fear and the love and the sheer stubborn insistence on surviving that human beings bring to even the most terrible circumstances. The sailors who kept the engines running while fire burned above them. The rescue swimmers who went into the dark water and brought people back. The diplomats in Doha who took the phone calls nobody wanted to take. The ordinary citizens of Tehran and Tel Aviv and Kuwait City and San Diego who did not ask for any of this and who will nevertheless carry it for the rest of their lives.
We will continue this coverage in the days and weeks ahead. The formal military phase of this conflict may be over, but the story is not. There will be memorial services and congressional hearings and diplomatic negotiations and economic analyses, and eventually, historians will begin to write the full account of these 14 days. That account will be more complete than anything we have been able to give you in this broadcast, which was of necessity fragmentary, provisional, and live. But I want to say this. We tried to be accurate. We tried to be honest. We tried to tell you what we knew and to tell you clearly what we didn't know. We tried not to make things worse in the telling. Whether we succeeded is for you to judge.
If you are listening to this and you lost someone this week, a son, a daughter, a spouse, a parent, a friend, I want you to know that this broadcast, this entire long night and day of speaking, was in some sense addressed to you. The person you lost was real and mattered and will not be forgotten, not by us and not by anyone who heard their story in these hours. Hold on to each other. That is the only instruction I know how to give at the end of something like this. Hold on to each other.
Hey, you've been listening to Continental Radio News Network's extended coverage. I'm Alex Mercer.
I'm Sierra Lane. We'll be back at the top of the hour with a full situation update. Stay with us.